Gregg "Pup" Johnson, 1st New Zealand SAS Regiment, retired. Nature doesn't lie. Pukary.nz. Welcome to a most refreshing conversation with a true Renaissance warrior, Gregg "Pup" Johnson. I became aware of Pup's current endeavours through a post that I quote in the show. Allow me to read it to you here. 7 deployments with the SAS, 3 years as a security contractor in Iraq at the height of the sectarian violence, 2 years in Thailand during a military coup was all so easy compared to now trying to help people thrive. It's so hard trying to educate closed organizational minds. So much talk of he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. So much ticking the box support. Have run 5 Pukary programs for 2nd 1st Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment with amazing outcomes and not a single thank you, not a single returned email. I thought that was so telling and powerful when I read it. And there's a link to it below. So in order to facilitate a very open conversation, in order to help our younger generation and to train our soldiers differently, we linked up, and here it is. After joining the Army at 17 and a lengthy career in the New Zealand SAS and Tier 1 military contracting in Iraq, Pup eventually returned to New Zealand, and after a conversation with the world's best multi-sport athlete, Nathan Fa'ave, started a new chapter of his life at Outward Bound. He is now a part of Pukary.nz, and the link is there in the show notes, where he uses Mother Nature to teach, show, and improve both toughness and resilience in civilians and the soldiers in our New Zealand military. Pup has been a guest on Joe Hortai's epic Aotearoa podcast and show this year. I'm humbled that he is now appearing on here. The link to that is in the show notes too. Like many SF veterans, Pup is using his Special Forces experience and training to help others. And of all of these, I think the words acta non verba sums up the necessity of what he teaches. Actions, not words. So many organizations these days, including the New Zealand military, simply pay lip service to mental health, to OSH, to self-care, and they lack the actions that are required to achieve an actual outcome. The outcome being a combat mindset, stress inoculation, toughness, resilience, and performance. Our current society does not teach these to the degree that we learned, that our grandparents knew, and it's not the current generation that's to blame. But Pup has taken up the mantle of recognizing a problem and creating a solution. A very open conversation with a Special Forces combat veteran. It was an honor to have Pup speak on the show. I'm sure you'll love listening to him as much as I did. I will leave with Pup's quote, "Nature heals and nature doesn't lie." After this, I encourage you to get outside the front door, get outside your car and just take a 2-minute walk in our gorgeous world and heal. You can find Gregg at Pukary.nz and on Insta, Gregg, 2 Gs, Gregg Spartan. Notes are below, links are below. Thanks for watching. Hi, I'm Damien Porter, former Special Forces operator, high performance living coach from eatwellmovewell.net, and you're listening to my Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast. Subscribe for more amazing tips, interviews, and wisdom from phenomenal guests, and get your free copy of my 5-day meal plan and exercise ebook at realketonesaustralia.com. This show is sponsored by realketonesaustralia.com, the best and most effective ketone supplement on the market to reduce anxiety, enhance brain performance, and supply twice as much energy as glucose. You can find all my former shows on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Google, Amazon, and Libsyn. Thanks for watching and listening. And we're live. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, and welcome to my guest, Gregg "Pup" Johnson.
Hello, bro. Grateful to be here.
Look, it was really nice chatting with you just quickly before. it's amazing to be able to connect with you via other countries, reconnect in a little way. Now, I'd like to frame this up right for the listener straight away. I've got an Instagram post of yours, and it really stood out to me. And it's not easy for things on Instagram to stand out with such strength, but I'm going to read it, Pup, and please bear with me because it's preaching to the choir, but this is definitely for the listeners. 7 deployments with the SAS, 3 years as a security contractor on Iraq at the height of the sectarian violence, 2 years in Thailand during a military coup was also easy compared to now trying to help people thrive. It's so hard trying to educate closed organizational minds. So much talk, so much support, and so on and so on. It's amazing that you wrote that, because compared to your warfighter experience, how difficult is it trying to put good causes towards our former leaders in the military and trying to do better for the soldiers?
Yeah, it's hard, and man, I've been studying words for a long time, so I don't, when I say a word, I don't always mean, but there's not a way to explain. So frustrated could be a word, but it's not how I feel. But frustrated, yeah, bro, it's incredibly hard. It's for us, the New Zealand military, or where I've come from, outside of the Auckland or the unit that you and I have served in Auckland, they don't, in my view, they don't have enough combat experience to understand what is truly important. So in my time in service with good people, we got to see the things that were important, and we took those lessons from that, and we've become better ourselves. And for me, when I was still in the unit as a team leader, trying to make our people as best we could.
Absolutely.
So yeah, seeing it, like I went back to the army just not so long ago for 2 years, bro, to training wing in 2nd, 1st in Burnham, and yeah, just seeing how closed they were to other views, just seeing how close they were to different training modalities or ways of training. One thing I said from my time when I went back to, I spent that 3 years as a contractor in Iraq, and then going back to the unit, I said to those guys, as we were getting ready to deploy back to Afghan, I said, man, what I learned in Iraq was that the enemy dictates what you do. It's all well and good having all these flash SOPs and TTPs and doing things a set way every time. But we found in Iraq, we got caught out very quickly doing that. As a contractor, they adapted. They don't have the bureaucracy that
there's no
the military has. Right, they go through that R&D cycle very quickly. So coming back and talking to leaders now, and now my passion is helping people using nature as a modality. So trying to educate leaders that there's another way that we can do these things. And I used to say to people in the army that, hey, give me a platoon of soldiers and I'll take them in the bush for a month, and they'll be just as good as any basic training you've run. They might look a bit different and they might not be able to march so good, but soldiering and awareness and situational awareness, they'd be right up there.
Which is what we're trying to teach them. What I'll do, Pup, is for the audience, I'm going to go through a bit of your background. But currently, before, just so people, I love getting the website out there so people know where to go now. The website you spoke of is pukary.co.nz.
.nz, Pukary.nz, and Pukary is Māori for resilience.
Brilliant. And we're going to touch a lot on resilience today, awesome. Post-traumatic stress, holistic performance, and so on. But let's just paint the picture of you. And I know it's hard. I mean, thank you. I have to say, in front of everybody, thank you for your humility and openness to come on the show, because you're doing this for a greater good. You're a former Special Forces operator from one of the world's smallest units, and we just don't get in these public domains. So it's brilliant that you're doing that. Thank you. Let's go through your military sort of background and what brought you to this place.
Yeah, so I joined my father was Air Force, so I grew up on or around the Air Force. He was an avionics technician, but so I spent a lot of time as a childhood hanging out at the Woodburn Air Force Base. There was some old planes there back in the day that I was allowed to play on, and you know, I always dreamed of being a helicopter crewman, but once I went to school and you know, I didn't have the education to do that. So next best thing is, as a kid growing up, I loved playing war.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, whenever I could, and would dress up to watch movies, and yeah, so it's just a natural progression to join the army. And originally I'd wanted to be an armourer because I loved guns. So I went to Polytech and did a pre-engineering course, but then went and did the testing for joining the army. And my three options were infantry, infantry, or infantry. so
The
so I was
best.
like, yeah, bro, yeah. So I was like, sweet, I'll be infantry. Yeah, so from there, that was 1991, and I went into TF first, just because I went in at 17. So you had to wait to 17 and a half to go to regular force back then, and 17. So went to TF for a year and a half, and then went and changed or tested again and went to regular force in January 1993. Posted to 1 battalion, did some time there. Compassionate posting to 2nd 1st Battalion due to a grandmother dying. Spent time there, was lucky enough to do 3 years in Ricky Platoon, 2nd 1st, once I got there. And then did selection in 99 and badged in 2000.
Nice. What was your driving force to try for Special Forces selection?
Internally, bro, there was something that always said to me, well, two things. Yeah, there's this internal drive that if we ever went to combat, I want to be with the best guys, and I want to do the best missions. So that was one driver. But as a kid growing up, a big part of my early life was the Falklands War. And there was a Falklands magazine that came out, and it was, I think, a 14-part series. And I would save up my pocket money and every 2 weeks the magazine, and I'd be there the morning the shop opened to see if my magazine had turned up. Anyway,
nice.
on the back of one of those covers was a SBS guy, and he had, you know, he had a beard and he had big gaiters and a Gore-Tex jacket and a big pack, and yeah, that just, you know, I was like, man, if I'm going to be in the military one day, that's what I want to do. Yeah, and obviously worked and achieved that gratefully.
You had the vision and purpose. So I think that's so important for people of any aspiration. I mean, the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, I've got some veterans on, but I've got some top scientists on, and they've got to have that vision in their head of what they want to be and achieve. So 99 selection, you spent, how long did you spend in the unit, and then you went contracting?
Yeah, I think I did 3 years in the unit, and that was, I did a deployment in 2002 to Afghanistan, and yeah, it was amazing. You know, I was at 27, I think, or 28. And it was my dream come true. You know, we're out there, we're based next to the German Special Forces and Navy SEALs and Green Berets and Norwegian guys that we had an amazing relationship with. And, you know, we had drones and AC-130s, and back then 160th were doing all our infills. And it was just, yeah, as a young SAS soldier, it was amazing. I was doing it, you know, it was the dream. I was going to be on the back of the magazine. You know, so then when I come home, and the reality hit in that our unit just didn't have that level of assets for training at home. Yeah, and so, you know, that was just a reality check for me, and Iraq had kicked off, and those opportunities. So you know, I took that opportunity to go and do that.
So
which
I would have to say, I'd have to say thank you, because you sort of gave me my job.
Yes, yeah.
The background again for
The
listeners
exodus.
there, I think I did it in the Zero Limits show, was because of the guys going to Iraq, they formed a manning drop. Of course, 2005, they formed the counter-terrorist team, which was just and I continue to say thank you to the unit for making me the man I am today, making me where I am, or giving me the skills to then go on, which you're going to speak about today as well. Yeah, interesting. I just want to touch on a point there for the military people. You said that, you know, coming back from Afghan, you realized how small the unit was, didn't have the assets. But also the flip side, the positive side of that is you were so highly trained that you slotted into that world straight away as well, weren't you?
Yeah, and I got to that team leader level very quickly. And one thing I didn't know, when I got recruited out of New Zealand to go over there to Iraq, they were doing 1 badge guy to 4 infantry.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I didn't, that was to a British company, Control Risk Group. So yeah, I didn't find out that till later, but that's how they were saying Kiwis could come, that they'd take one of us to the 4 infantry guys. But yeah, it was very easy to slid in. And New Zealand soldiers, outside of those assets, we are some of the best in the world. We still run the best tracking course that a lot of the tier 1 organizations come to, and soldier for soldier, we're in the bush especially. We're as good as anybody, and we're lucky in that. So I fitted in, and after I think 2 rotations with CRG, I transferred to Triple Canopy, an American company, where I was lucky enough to work with all ex-Delta guys from Black Hawk Down. And that was so educational.
Brad Helling, does that name ring a bell?
No.
There's a couple of guys from Black Hawk Down that are going to be coming on this show. I just know them through Pat Mack, but looking forward to hearing that story firsthand. And I just read the other day that there's actually, I think, 4 helicopters took RPG hits that day, not just the 2.
Yeah. I was lucky. My project manager, he took me through Black Hawk Down one day. And told me all the parts that were true and not true from the movie, and it was really awesome. But some of those guys that what he said to me is, because the movie had to be condensed, obviously a lot of those key figures were actually 3, 4, 5 different people,
right?
But to make the movie fit a slot, but yeah, so I got to meet actually some of those people that were doing some of those things that are portrayed in the movie, the Delta guys, and they were leadership of our company. And it's really cool to see and meet and get to talk to people that were at the time legends.
It is, though. I mean, we're always learning from other people's experiences, and I guess that's why I'm painting this picture of what you've gone through to get you to your headspace now. You spoke about essentially the normal army hierarchy just being in that box. It wasn't your words, but that's how I'm sort of translating.
That's true.
yeah, and I want to get to that because I talked about your humility at the start, and human humility, brooking no sense of class. We've got our tenets of the unit, but I'll never forget, we sent a 21, 22-year-old guy from our team over to an explosive entry school in America.
Yes.
TEAS, for those that are operator minded. And he came back, and this 21, 22-year-old guy is teaching all of us, including the squadron sergeant major.
Yeah.
And we just, teach us. It's not, you're 22, you can't teach us. And I can't imagine as a company sergeant major in the regular army, even looking at that guy and wanting to learn.
Yeah, no, it's still the same to a point. There are some amazing people, as we know, but yeah, it's definitely. When I was back in training, like my specialty was urban operations, so training young soldiers in the infantry and urban operations. And man, because of YouTube, these guys turn up good.
Yeah,
and my job was just to go, hey, why don't we try it a little bit like this, or why don't we do it a Kiwi way, and what you're doing is awesome, but let's try. And because of my experience, I got to offer those changes, and they'd accept it because they were watching Pat Mack, they were watching these good people, online, and they were good. But yeah, to have one of them turn around to a SAR major and say, hey, come and do some room combat with me, probably wouldn't fly. Yeah.
No, it's unfortunate, but that's why I've got you on the show, because I want to talk about the solutions. And then, of course, you came back to the unit from contracting. What was your mindset there? Because in my mindset, you've gone up and up. You've been in combat operations in Iraq, and then what was your shift to come back to the unit, or was it coming home? What happened there?
Yeah, it was coming home. That period I was in Iraq, or when I was finishing, America, Blackwater were flooding the market with young soldiers, young Marines, and the pay, your pay was dropping, and the risk to reward was way down, and the quality of people. When I started, it was all SF guys, tier 1 and Green Berets, a couple of Navy SEALs, real high level guys that were good to go. So as we started bringing in these 4-year, Marines and good people, but we already had a special operations background. We're all bodyguard trained from our organization. We'd done it at an elite level already, where these people were just coming in and getting a 2-week course and thrown on the street. So that was a decider, and coming home was a natural progression. I wanted to come home, and yeah, lucky enough, reached out to the unit. The unit said, yeah, come in for an interview, and said, come back.
Oh,
Yeah.
brilliant! It's phenomenal to come back into that family, into that tribe.
Yeah.
And then what? Then where was your direction? I mean, I like to say with us, sometimes we need a whiteboard.
Yeah, yeah. From there, obviously, come back and just progressed, normal as you would in the unit. But then we got notice that we were going back to Afghanistan. And the funny story was there was talk that somebody had to go to Australia they were, on current operations. Somebody needed to go to Australia and bring all the TTPs back that they were currently using to teach the unit before we redeployed. And I went around just telling everybody I could that I was going. And then I get called into the SAR Major's office, who you've had on the show. Get called into Moo's office, and he said, "Hey, you're off to Aussie, and here's the list of things you need to bring home." So I was wrapped with that. Went over to Aussie for 4 months, and then brought the stuff back, and was lucky enough to be a team leader on our first redeployment in 08 or 09. Yeah, as a team leader.
Brilliant. So you came to Perth, obviously.
I did. Yep. So I did 4 months over there, just observing their cycle, who were going through the urban phase.
Yeah.
Which was awesome. Yeah, and again, so much learning from there, and good people that I got to work with or got to be alongside.
I won't mention their names, but when I shifted to Perth in 2008, and I fell into police here,
Yep.
3 other operators from the unit, from the Green Roll Squadron, came over. And Perth's such a small place. I'd go running in the hills, and literally we'd run past each other.
Yeah. When I went over to Aussie, nobody had turned up to the airport to pick me up. So one of those guys come and picked me up, and I stayed at his place for the weekend, and then it turned up at the lines and on the Monday.
Oh, awesome! They are very well known here. I run into some of the regiment, as they call it, this side, and yeah, they're very well respected soldiers as well.
They were good at home, eh? They were. All 3 of them are still top blokes, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So where did you end up going to the regular army, and how did that go?
Oh, so a long journey in between that. So yeah, I stayed in the unit, did 2 tours back to back, or had 6 months off or just over, and redeployed as a team leader again.
So what years did you go?
I want to say 2008, 2009. So we're there over a winter, Christmas.
Yeah.
And then come home, and then I redeployed to 10 to 11.
Were you there for Kabul when and I can mention Steve's name, but rest in peace.
No, I was on rotations to them.
Right.
So the famous photo of Willie and Jamie in the street, I was there for that.
I could not believe that popped up. So
we were busy walking, mate, while they were getting their photos taken.
Yeah, it looks like the most perfectly staged photo. Google Willie Apyada, Afghanistan, and it's going to come up. So he was my boss, for the people listening, for you, the group commander, and literally I just saw it just come up on the news, and I was like,
looks familiar.
Yeah.
Yes, that was an amazing day. So yeah, from there I come home. I'd had a Thai partner for almost 8 years, and I got home, and at the time they were getting ready to send me to training wing, and I'd just been a team leader for a couple of years, doing rotations to Afghan, living the dream, and doing cool stuff with cool people, and going to training wing just didn't fit my vision.
Right.
Yeah, and I was scared of a computer, so yeah, luckily Michael Meltz, who you might have met, is an American guy. His wife's a Kiwi, but he worked for Surefire flashlights.
Oh, right, nice.
And I'd got to know him over the years, and he was in New Zealand, and we went out and had a beer, and yeah, he said, "Oh, what are you up to?" And I said, "Oh, I'm thinking of getting out." And he said, "Oh, where are you going to go?" And I said, "Oh, my partner's in Thailand." And yeah, he had friends who owned a company over there, so he said, "You want a job?" And said, "I'd love a job." So yeah, he organised that, and I got out in 2012 and went over to Thailand. And had a job straight away for 3 years, which was awesome.
And you mentioned it in your post, a military coup in Thailand.
Yeah, so while I was there, the military decided that the government wasn't the best, So pushed tanks and that into the street and took over. And
Wow.
yeah, it was quite violent for quite a while. There was like areas, like I had to go past on the train to work every day, where a protest, huge protest, bigger than anything we see in New Zealand. But there was a running gun battles at time between them and the police and the military, snipers, and people were getting grenades thrown at them, and people were dying every now and then. And yeah, I carried a concealed Glock for 2 years every day, no matter where I went, whether it be the movies or work or the pub. I was going to protect myself and others if I could, if that's what it come to. So yeah, I did that for a period.
And on that, Pup, I teach the how not to die stuff.
Yes.
I'm trying to put free things out there. It's not,
which are awesome, mate. Yeah.
Oh,
watch your.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because if it's like this show, like we said with Moo, if one thing we say helps one person, but it's not about chopping throats and pulling handguns. So putting yourself back in that place, given your special forces training experience, particularly for situational awareness, did you feel relatively in control and relatively safe of what's going on around there?
Yeah, and having been all that time in Afghan and Iraq, it was bad, but it was nothing like those two.
Yes.
It was nothing like that. But yeah, I mean, it was dangerous, and obviously I was, carrying a pistol for a reason. And but no, you're right. And yeah, but as you are teaching, and the things I watch you say, that's what it was. I moved with purpose, and I understood where cover was, and understood where my outs were at all times. And I always had money in my wallet, so if I couldn't get this, I could get a taxi, or made sure I had the right shoes on, bro. I always had lace-up shoes, so not slip-ons in case I had to run for my life. Didn't want them coming off.
That's isn't it funny? Special forces, they think us in the gear with the guns and all this stuff, and really it comes down to lace-up shoes.
Yeah, but that's the detail we do, eh? And it was interesting because I watch your stuff, and I said to my partner, and I usually go walking after dinner every night, and she's ex-police forensics, so
oh wow,
has an idea. But anyway, we were walking, and I was just saying what you were doing, because she's like, oh, who's the podcast with? And I said you, and some of the stuff you're doing. And she goes, God, I'm so glad we don't have to worry about it. And I said, love, I'm always worried about it. You're just not aware. I said, I am protecting us as we, but I said, I'm well practiced in it, that it doesn't take my time. It doesn't take capacity anymore. And I'm not hypervigilant. I've had periods of being hypervigilant, but I'm certainly not now. I'm just aware.
Yeah, exactly. It takes nothing to change. It takes nothing to change sides when you're walking with your partner.
Exactly, bro. Yeah.
It's none of that bandwidth, as Nick Caldwell speaks of. It's just a natural thing, and it's easy to do. But if we can pass it on to others,
yes, yeah. But it takes repetition, eh? And that's what's really cool about what you're doing. It's and it's stuff that I've been trying to do with the army, just trying to tell them that things take repetition. I can't show you once and you're good to go. You've got to repeat that process over and over, and every now and then you need somebody to come in to check your process, because it's very easy to lie to ourselves that I'm doing the deadlift right, and oh no, next minute my back's gone.
Oh yeah. And that's what we were so good at. And us, I can't remember who I saw doing it a while back. We're so critical of each other in our debriefs in the special forces, but not because we're mean, not because we perfectionists, even though we're striving for excellence. It's so that we can be absolutely it's on us to get better, and it's on us to critique each other. And I'm trying to think of that ownership. We take absolute ownership of our skills.
Well, it's professionalism, isn't it? It's that level of professionalism that we chose to by doing selection to go and do that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So Thailand, Jesus, 2 years with a gun down your pants.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah,
it was interesting. But it's funny. I was teaching the special forces at the time. Outside of that, I was teaching shooting courses to civilians, rifle, pistol, low light courses.
Yeah.
This company I was working for was an outdoor company. I was doing all their R&D, or some of their R&D and product and that, and working with companies from around the world. It was awesome, bro. It was a real cool time. Every night was Friday night if I wanted it to be. Thailand, obviously. So I got a lot of that out of my system. and then
We
yeah,
love
come home.
Thailand. We just got back from Thailand on holiday.
Yeah.
The family of 5, 3 kids, and I felt safer there than I did in Perth, just because there's not the mentally unstable and the drugs there, and it was just a different awareness, a different. I mean, it's very busy, like you said, but
Yes.
interesting people, the nice people.
Yes. Yeah. Humble, very humble.
Mm.
Yeah. And having not a lot is I feel teaches us that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Thailand, and then back to New Zealand.
Yeah. Back to New Zealand. Yeah, it's funny with that Thai partner, like we'd got over there and we broke up as soon as I got there.
Oh, is it
but which is all good.
That's the holiday side of things, or the long distance side?
Yeah, and you know, that was okay because, you know, that's obviously the journey. So yeah, I was happy with that. And yeah, so yeah, back to when I was in Iraq working with the Delta guys or ex-Delta guys, you know, they introduced me to combat psychology.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they introduced me to the mindset and combat mindset, which, you know, wasn't a thing in the New Zealand Army at the time. So yeah, that really piqued my interest, and from there I started researching combat mindset, reading all the books, you know, on combat, on killing.
I just interviewed Dave.
I saw that. yeah, I'll definitely watch that. And he educated me, bro. His books educated me a whole lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that created a passion for learning about how do we be better as people operators, you know, as operators, especially going back to the army.
Yeah.
And that led to a fascination or a desire to understand PTS or post-traumatic stress, which led me to understanding how powerful nature was in that space. So yeah, this journey, so all leading up to coming back to New Zealand. I come back and I was lucky enough to get an interview for a job at Customs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was really excited about that. And then I did my interview, and I believe I got to the last 3. And it was for a role that at the time they didn't have the budget to do that role full time.
Oh.
So the other half of the role was a technical job. You know, and that I don't know.
Computers and you don't mix.
Oh, bro. and surveillance stuff.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just that, you know, I didn't have 1%, you know, I had all the other stuff, and they were excited for that, but so I didn't get the job. Long story. So yeah, as a former special operations guy, you know, there wasn't a lot of jobs in New Zealand. And I just finished. I was reading a book by Nathan Fave, who's a 7 times world adventure racing champion.
Nathan is one of the. I think he's the best. We watched him his last race. Phenomenal racers.
Yeah. To be down by 2 hours, or have the 2-hour penalty to come back and win by 9 hours.
That was it. Yes.
Yeah. So I was reading his book, bro, and yeah, he just talked about his time at Outward Bound as an instructor. So knowing that I had a passion for people and PTS and nature, I wanted to be the way that I was going to help people. I finished it, and I wrote him an email, and he sent me one back the same day. Yeah. And he gave me he's like, hey, you need to ring this person, you need to ring this person and do this course, and then here's the Outward Bound contact details, and you'll have to do a selection, so do this first. And he just laid a pathway out for me, and I was like, roger that. So I got on with it, and here's a course in outdoor adventure something here in Nelson, where I live now. And he told me to ring them, and their course was starting on a Wednesday, and this was Monday afternoon. So I rang them and said, hey, this is who I am, and this guy Nathan's told me to ring you. And they come in for interview. That was Tuesday, and started the course for a year on the Wednesday.
A year-long course?
Yeah. Adventure tourism. Yep. But they do whitewater kayaking, rock climbing, rafting, tramping. Yeah, just to guide people. But I was just using it to upskill to go and do the Outward Bound selection.
Yeah.
So yeah, went and did that. Did that for that year, and then did 6 months of sea kayak guiding over a summer, because the selection for Outward Bound wasn't the next year until March. And did selection for Outward Bound and got accepted to be an instructor there. So yeah, did just over a year there, and my plan was to just understand how they use the outdoors as a process to move people through a growth continuum.
In general, historically, I mean, Outward Bound was formed by Sir Edmund Hillary and Murray Dickel.
No, that was the Outdoor Pursuit Centre.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
Yeah, Outward Bound was created by a German educator called Kurt Hahn.
Right.
In the 1941, I think, because German U-boats were taking out all the merchant shipping.
Yeah.
And what was happening was all the young sailors were dying on the life rafts.
Oh.
And all the old were living.
Right.
So Kurt Hahn was brought into these shipping companies to help develop a program to make the young people more resilient.
Oh, and so brilliant. The young people, so it's historically for the younger people.
Yeah, historically. And then, that was 1941 in England, and then scrolling around the world. New Zealand was started in 1962, I think.
I'm literally just thinking out loud, is that part of the becoming a man process? Is that part of that sort of transition process for younger people that they might have been missing in the modern world?
I wouldn't say that's a direct focus, but for men and women, just using nature as a tool and having to do hard stuff, and that's what moves them through a process of being better. And not one person did I see or have I ever heard that hasn't taken something from it.
Well, let's delve into that. You've used the word nature many times, and I really try and pick up on things and don't let the the interviewee brush over something.
Yeah.
How does nature help you through these things? How does nature form resilience? How did you see nature being used for, I think you said, combat psychology and so on?
Well, nature, just as nature, Papa Tuanuku for us, Mother Earth, she resonates at a frequency, like all things do. Everything has a frequency, everything.
Absolutely.
That's what we are. She resonates at a frequency that is healing. So no matter what, if you go out and spend time in Mother Nature, there's so much research out there, so much science, so many studies, so many books. If you spend time in Mother Nature, you're going to get an effect, and that effect is positive.
Absolutely.
Mother Nature, unless you're doing dumb stuff, she doesn't hurt you. So that'll be the first one, is her vibration and her the way she holds you.
Beautiful.
The second one would be that nature, mate, doesn't lie. You go out in nature. We just had a group of 74 from the Army on adventure training. We had some good wind, Brian. We had some big oceans. You can pretend you're tough, but when you get out in that sea and it's your first time in a big old ocean and you're in a 2-person kayak and those waves are 2 meters and that wind is pushing you, and you face fear that we get from combat. So she doesn't lie. If you're out there in Mother Nature or in nature and it's cold, you've got to put clothes on. You can't lie and say you're not cold, because you'll die of hypothermia. If it's pouring with rain, you have to put up shelter. You don't get to lie and say, I'm not getting wet. So yeah, for me, Mother Nature is a great way for us to have to look in the mirror and tell the truth, because she is very honest, and she has rules that are non-negotiable. And that's what I love about it, bro. So taking people out and exposing them to the truth where they can't escape. And I also talk about shooting. What I love about shooting is the target doesn't lie. I had so many people used to come to the ranges and say, oh, I'm a good shot, and put them on the line, bro. Oh, it doesn't look like it. Yeah, and that's what I love about shooting also, that it doesn't lie. Like, if you don't do the principles, then the outcome at the end is, at the target end, is not what you need.
Yeah.
And then throw in some pressure, and as you know, that just grows and grows. And yeah, and for me, if we lie in nature, that problems just grow and grow and grow, and then we have accidents. That's
a brilliant analogy. Yeah, if you are that ego, I think you said toughness, and I'll throw an ego there as well.
Yeah. But toughness for me is, and I wrote to you and said, if we could talk about toughness and resilience.
Yes.
If this is a good way to segue into that, is, I feel resilience is thrown around a lot now and misunderstood. And my partner's sister's a teacher at a high school with over 2,000 students, and I think a couple of years ago they were having a real issue with suicide. And anyway, they got the brief from somebody that they need to teach more resiliency. Well, she didn't know how to do that.
No, I mean, where's the maths calculation? You teach maths.
Exactly right. Yeah. And I don't know if there's an awesome book called the Emotional Life of the Brain, and it's written by a guy who 70s, 80s, 90s was one of the leading brain researchers developing parts of the brain and neural pathways and how everything fits together.
Right.
And he talks about resiliency in his book, and what they now know is resilience. It's not like a give or you have or you don't have. What they call it now, or when he defines it, he says that you are either fast to recover or slow to recover. And all that is about the noise in the amygdala. If that keeps going and the prefrontal cortex doesn't engage to create quiet or whatever, new thought, then you won't be resilient because you're slow to recover. But if you're fast to recover, what they call resilient, you'll bounce back a lot quicker. Your thinking brain takes over from the other brain, and you're in control a lot quicker.
You said in control a lot quicker, but moving forward from that to let's say post-traumatic stress, but not literally that. I'd say it more overwhelmed, depression. A lot of the things we see, is that also when you see the cup getting too full, the bucket overflowing because the amygdala is getting so much input that prefrontal cortex or the coping mechanisms can't keep up with the load?
Exactly, bro. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But for PTS, the science now says that PTS mostly, especially in combat veterans, is a fragmented memory.
Yeah.
So it's a memory that hasn't been put together and filed away where it should be.
Right.
So all those parts not joined, your brain's confused, it creates all those other issues that people with PTS get. And that's why we finding processes that, that's why mushrooms are having such an amazing effect, because they allow somebody safely to go through a process of putting that memory back together where they're not traumatized or re-traumatized by those thoughts.
My gosh, I said to Moo, I said to my guest Heston Russell yesterday, I can't believe I'm on this side being a podcaster and interviewer. I got to think so far ahead and unpack for the listener. And I've got about 5 things there.
Yeah.
So just
told you I had a lot on my mind.
Yeah, that's good. The psilocybin, it's due to be legal here for doctors to prescribe soon. Awesome. But just want to touch on PTS versus mental health, the breakdown. Back in our day, the mums would have a nervous breakdown, or back in the 1960s, housewife sort of thing. And I never really say my opinions. I go from the quotes of others. And Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, he was saying, post-traumatic stress is you having that one memory come up. That event is right now popping up in your head and you can't get rid of it, which is exactly what you said. So many people with mental health issues now, it's really that breakdown, that overwhelm. Sure, the effects are devastating, but there's a distinct difference between true post-traumatic stress that you're talking about, with a memory not being processed or filed away in the right place or dealt with, versus really just can't deal with what life's being thrown at them right now.
Yeah, and that's an example, like in Burnham here in New Zealand, one of the army camps, they've just had a whole thing around mental health and had some speakers come in and the head army psych. And, I say to a lot of people, we've got to be very aware that what 99.9% of our people in the army at the moment are dealing with is not PTS.
No.
Why? Because, so let me make that too slow. Not PTS from combat. It could be PTS from childhood trauma. It could be PTS from other things, but it's
anything that was traumatic to them and their
exactly, bro. Yeah, but it's not combat related trauma. So, we need to. What I feel is they are heading down a process of just lumping all traumas together. Where I think we still need a mechanism, because it's a military that understands combat stress. I feel but I feel because we've got all this lumped together now, we've got, like you said, depression, we've got burnout, we've got all these other things that we're very quick to label. We've got people saying, our people are not resilient. I just think we have to be very careful at heading down that labeling everything. And I think it still needs to be clearly defined. And
I agree. And it's not a one size fits all treatment in any way, shape or form.
No, hell no.
you did speak about toughness versus resilience, and I really like those two terms because who was I listening to? I was listening to Dan Pronk. So Dan Pronk was the RMO, it's a
Yep.
regimental medical officer for SASR here, and he was talking about the first time he met a bunch of operators before he was really getting to the military. His brother had become a badged regiment operator, and he was at a barbecue with these guys, and they're drinking beer, but they were shredded. They were doing inhuman amounts of pull-ups, but there was no machismo, was his quote.
Yes.
These guys almost were at a level where they didn't have to show that off, and that's what I loved about the unit. But toughness, you must see some fake toughness come on these things first off, and when you see them put into that nature world, it gets stripped away, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. And that resilience program we are running for 2nd 1st Battalion, a trip ago, we ran, and we had a big day, and it's big seas, big winds, and it was, we got together as a group, and I said, hey, we need everybody to stay together. This is a stretch. It's called the Mad Mile. It's a mile long, and it's some pretty rough water, and there is real risk if you're not on your game. So I gave them the brief and said, hey, keep a good, we had 10 kayaks out on the water, 10 student kayaks, double kayaks. Bro, we get around the corner where this big sea is and the wind, and bomb bursts, man. The fast guys are gone. The slow guys are at the back with their paddle up in the air, panicking, and, with some darker skinned people are white or green. And, we were, 200-300 meters spread out. And we got around the corner, and as like for me, it was a teachable moment. So we got around into this place called Anchorage, which is a sheltered little bay, and or big bay, and I got them all to raft up again, and just went through and said, oh, how are we feeling? And we just talked about heart rate, and talked about breathing, and talked about the old narrowing, and because nature's such a cool teacher, she'd offered them all that, bro. You just talk through all these things. If you've read Brain Blue Brain, for people that know that book, however we frame being in fight or flight or thriving. So it was perfect. But it was people that that time had been talking it up, and then thrown into that situation. It was again humbling for them, and really good for me to be able to offer some lessons around that, and for us going forward. But for me, that debate of resilience, toughness is, there's a real clear new paradigm on what toughness is and how it can be taught. And I think that's a conversation we need to be having more, especially for the military, is our young people aren't tough. That's true, and society's done that. It's not on them. They are a product of society. But we know there are ways to make them tougher in a safer way, in a more effective way. And that's what I feel, a lot of our people are missing. We just want to say, oh, they're not resilient. They're not resilient. Well, if we were tougher, then I wouldn't have to be so resilient. Or my level of needing to be resilient would be different.
So how do you see, because we're really talking about the military here, training soldiers differently.
Or for anybody, I think, bro. Anybody.
Absolutely, for everybody. It's interesting. I'll just not segue or tangent, but it's related, and then we'll come back. Moo talked about, and for those people who didn't see it, the Sergeant Major of the New Zealand Army talked about, in our generation of our kids, they have 20% less bone density because they're not skipping rope and jumping out of trees. And that society has done that to them. That's not their fault. But of course, we could take ownership and make our kids jump up and down and do things.
Yes.
So as you say, it's for anybody, but how do you see how we build that toughness, and what's your processes? What's your vision there, Pup?
Is teaching people a language that's different than just harden the F up.
Good.
Teaching and understanding that being tough for all of us is very different. You saw it on your selection and my selection. People failed. And some of us passed. It's a journey. It's a knowing that, we need to, because we are starting at a place that is what it is, then we have to understand that's a journey. Like, we could do some hard things like physical training, and we make that very hard for 8 minutes.
Mm.
And this is just, I'm just throwing out things. And then we do that for a period. And then we've moved the bar already, but we're using words like challenge. They know if you reframe how you are feeling to challenge, then people rise more than get defeated.
Yeah.
So just using key language, key words, and making that process in a time frame. Like, we need to build this toughness over this time, and these are the steps that we're going to take. We're going to expose them to the mind, so they understand self,
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to understand them to their own physical performance. Like, when it gets hard for me, how do I feel? And then with that education of the mind and some tools like breathing and mindfulness and good self-talk, then we can move them along. And then next time it's 10 minutes, and then we just build up. And we this course the venture training we just run, the Delta company SAR Major was talking to me during it, and that whole company this year hasn't done anything longer than a week in the bush.
Wow.
So how can we as an organization, or them, if we're saying we've got a problem with resilience, how do we build that resilience if we're only going into the bush from Monday night to Friday morning?
Which brings us back to, I think we started the conversation near the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You could take a group of soldiers away, or a group of brand new soldiers away for a month in the bush, and probably come out with a basically trained soldier, all the things they need. But I would add in that you've now built resilience.
Yes. And toughness.
Together, yes.
Yeah. And an understanding of self.
Absolutely.
Like, the things I watch that you put out is that if you understand self, it's so much easier. Then I can have a conversation with you and tell you how I'm feeling. And then you can understand how I'm feeling, and then either support me or tell me to harden up. And I honestly think that there is still a need to tell people to harden up, in the right way.
Yeah.
But sometimes we just need a little, hey, I need you to walk a bit faster. I need you to actually carry that machine gun. Sometimes there's a requirement, but with understanding, I think to still use some of that language, because it can be supportive. It doesn't have to be derogatory. Supportive
of the person, but then the person puts their self in support of the greater good. It's
exactly.
Heston Russell was quite interesting yesterday. So he ended up being a major of in the commandos. So relatively high ranking for those people listening. But he talked about putting all your assets together for their mission. That's what we do.
Yes.
For those people that you're talking about, they could then, it's a bit more than just about their self. They need to get that task done. They need to pick up that machine gun. They need to move those kayaks all together rather than just freaking out yourself and trying to get in a little bubble. Definitely, I can see how taking them in the bush would achieve that. I guess my question, devil's advocate, I am the interviewer, is has the New Zealand Army in 2022, because you only talk about New Zealand, has it not kept up with what society is giving them? I'd suggest and ask.
No, and the military, is very blinkered and very, an example when you talk to Moo and he said you asked him about performance.
Yeah.
And it blew me away, actually, which, yes and no, it blew me away. You asked about performance, and he said he'd tried to raise it, but people had said no, and it hadn't gone any further.
Yeah.
One year the military, performance should be a key indicator, or a key performance indicator, sort of.
Yeah.
Performance doesn't have to be special forces level. It can be the best infanteer you can be, or best engineer. So I was really blown away, and that's what I saw in my time back in.
Yeah.
That wasn't a supported narrative. So just jumping aside to why we started this program called Pukary for Army, is a WO1 sent out the scathing email to all WO1s in the Army, and he was part of the leadership organization and the junior NCO course, and he just said how weak our people were, and they couldn't work out of fobs, and they couldn't do this, and they couldn't do that, and they couldn't do more than a week in the bush, but there was no course of action to to be better.
You can't come to somebody with a problem without a solution, as in our world, Pup.
It was a huge rant, mate, and it was a huge rant in this email which got sent to me through back channels and said, "Can you have a look at this? And what are your thoughts?" And we created a program, the guys that I work with, and my concept, their program, and we've run 5 courses for them with amazing results, because, as you know, it's that easy.
Yeah.
When you have experience and you're an expert in a field, you can identify a problem. Like we used to, like anything we did, room combat is just a problem that you had to solve. Anything we did, just a problem, come up with the options, and solve it somehow.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then do the reflection and go, did that work? Yes, no, yes, whatever. Like how often did we spend time, like you and the commandos, and when I was there, trying to build new charges? Hey, let's make a new charge to do this. Well, what we've got actually works really well, but no, let's try. But the army just don't do that. They're not proactively looking for ways to be better, and that's sad. 2022, and looking at the world now, you just got to watch Ukraine, and that shit's real, and you want to be the best you can be, and if the organization's not taking that opportunity, it's sad. It's sad for our young people.
Well, I guess if we're talking about solutions, so you've got some soldiers being sent to your course. You've run it 5 times. Buy-in, I would suggest, is the next thing from a greater level, an overriding level. That buy-in will be important to get to see the importance of what you're doing.
Yeah, and again, everything we do is their words. We're just using military literature, their documents, to provide their language, to provide their people some learning outcomes or growth. Buy-in's been really hard, mate. And as you know, you can't just do a course. And Outward Bound really struggles with this, or any organization, that sends people away, is they go away and do the course, but then you come home, if you're not supported. Like I reached out to the leadership and said, hey, we're running this course. These are the outcomes that we're getting. We've got feedback from every soldier, which has been amazing. I said, I'd love to come and talk to you about the post-course process of ingraining that into training, because I've got a military background, and I've been training people for 25 years. I can understand how to build that into your day-to-day training, and nothing. Haven't had a reply. Haven't had anything. So to me, which says, they're loving what we're giving, but they're not enough to support it more, as in post.
So a bit boxed, I would suggest.
Very much so, bro.
Yeah.
Like if the Sergeant Major of the Army, with all his experience and all his knowledge, says to you that performance would be good, and the round table says no, something's wrong.
Well, what you're doing is super important, and I guess from our selection of putting one foot in front of the other, that's what you're doing. You're training that, say it's a group of 10, or I don't know how big your groups are, but you're getting feedback from that one person and getting feedback from that person. That's your start, and you're just keeping putting that one foot in front of the other. I hope that somehow what you're saying here will help to get that message out. I want to push on to PTS, because you're obviously passionate about that. We spoke before we started hit record about we're probably better people now than we were then. We've gone through post-traumatic growth, as a few doctors call it, both Dan Pronk and a few others in the resilience space. But I think it's pretty important that we give our Special Forces training experience, and also what we've gone through, our experience, back to others. Joe Horto talks about it in service of others, giving it back to the next warfighter generation coming through. Let's touch on PTS and maybe just finish off on resilience and tie that in a bow. What would you like to add into that?
I'll just say, just one on that, on resilience. We know a key strand of resilience is service to others.
Wow.
Now that is a key strand of any sort of resilience. So super important. And as you said, the experiences we've had and wanting to give back and on service, and I've written it as a note, I didn't understand service while I was in service.
You don't.
And I did, in total, I did 20 years in the military. And I didn't understand service. It's not till I've got out and done all this reflection and other learning that I now understand what service is. So I really find it interesting reading the Army News and some of the people that write in there. And, you know, Moo talks a lot about service. But again, I'm not seeing that in our young soldiers. They don't understand what service is. So yeah, trying to be of service now is really a different, no, it's awesome to be able to look back and say, well, I did all this stuff, but I didn't understand service, but now I'm trying hard to be of service.
Well,
Because it's important.
Let's elaborate that. So first off, when the sergeant major at the Army, I asked him what his role was, and he said his job was to serve others. I was blown away.
Yeah.
Now, Heston yesterday was talking about the evil he'd seen in this world, and I don't often ask war stories. We don't have to tell those war stories between us, but I thought it was really important for Heston to talk about that so that others could really see why he was over there doing it. Now, I'm going to paint that picture here because the soldier needs to know why the hell they're doing their job. So I'm going to ask you, it's a little bit blunt. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to. What evil have you seen in this world in your special forces role, and what did you guys do about it? Because I believe that's true service.
Yeah, and that's an awesome question, because a lot of people ask me, you know, why we were in Afghanistan, and I said because I saw. You never see the statistic, but they were killing more of their own than any military. You know, and like I said about that picture of Willie and that, you know, I think that was 5 or 6 suicide bombers in town that day, and they were just roaming around blowing up the biggest groups of people they could.
Women, children.
Yeah, not military. You know, busloads of people. You know, we went to a just down the road from us was an American base one day, and it had been vehicles were coming in and had a suicide attack on it, and we went out to that was our role to, you know, to go to respond to things like that. And we went out to one of those, and my team medic treated a young boy who was, I don't know, 10 years old, 11 years old, who just watched 2 of his brothers get vaporized. You know, that's the reality of what that is. And, you know, our job was to go and find those people and bring them to either prosecution or you know, send them to Valhalla. Yeah, that's because we did a course over there, counterinsurgency course that you had to do, and the professionals that were running that talked about the red 10%, and there's 10%, and my partner, who's, you know, was with police, knows as a statistic as well, or as a number, sorry, a percentage, red 10% that are never going to be reformed.
Exactly. They're evil.
So pure evil. You know, but saying that, like, I watched a lot of cool people on podcasts lately, operators, and they talk about how worthy the adversary was. And that's true. You know, we can say they were evil, and that's true because some of the things they did, but they were fighting for their cause. You know, and I understand that part as well.
Yeah.
You know, they were doing their thing for their beliefs, and that's the power of belief, isn't it? That
I think the power of belief, absolutely, but there's humanity as well.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
Which is different. We have our different religion, if that's what you're into. You have our different community norms. You know, it may not be wearing a burqa, it may be freedom, but when it comes to, you know, stringing a 10-year-old girl up and splitting her in half, or vaporizing the brothers, that's humanity. That's inhuman.
Yes. Yeah, agree.
And I'm bringing this up because the soldiers that are listening to this, and there will be soldiers, you're there to stop that from happening.
Yes.
That's why we take that so importantly, and that's our service. That's why we want to be good at our job.
Yeah, I think that was one thing, a common theme I was seeing when I went back to the Army was that wasn't a narrative that was talked about. Like, even in the New Zealand Army, from what I saw, combat mindset's not talked about enough. Right. You know, the process of seeing horrible things, you know, we've got to inoculate against PTS.
Exactly.
And that's one of is understanding, and I don't have PTS, and I never have, luckily, but I grew up with a mother who was a nurse, and, you know, I spent time as a kid in ED. I would go there after school. You inoculation. Know, it was, you know, and I'm grateful, in all my reading and learning and reflection, I was so grateful for my childhood actually inoculated me. reading war books, comics and all of that, I had an understanding of what war was and what it looks like. And when I went there, I had no surprises. I've been to, while I was in Iraq, I went to a suicide attack where there's 100 people dead. But it never shocked me because I knew that I was a soldier. And I knew as a soldier that you get exposed to some horrific things.
But the reason, the principle behind that is that you are then able to do your job. If I turn up to a road crash and I see bits everywhere, same thing as a suicide bomb,
yes,
and I flip out, I can't help anybody as a first responder.
No.
I need to be that we, as professional soldiers and other people that listen to this in the conflict world, we have to be able to do our job. And again, I'm thinking back to your niche, PUP, of New Zealand Defence Force. Those soldiers need to realize that's why we train the way we do. That's why we need to think that way. Yeah. I'm going to flip it a little bit, and I'm going to ask you, and I thought this was a great, finally come up with a good question. What was
all good.
Thank you. What was what's the best thing? I mean, I remember a couple of cool things in Timor, but what was the most good thing or best thing you sort of saw in your career, the good thing that came out of it?
Would be the people being our people, the teams that I got to work with, being good, being slick. I was out walking with a friend this morning, my partner and a friend, and she asked me about the military. And I always say, the big thing about the military is most, like infantry, artillery, the combat corps, you don't get to do your job until you deploy on operations.
Yeah.
So that, for me, that we were on the biggest stage as a tier 1 special forces team doing good missions, and we were good at what we were doing, and we were a good group of people. That's probably what I saw. Yeah, people working for each other, and I was lucky enough to have some amazing teams, and that stands out above anything else. Cool people, cool missions. Excited to be alive.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Excited to be alive, loving life. Look, you show that so much in what you're doing. I love the red glasses. I love that you've got nature in the social environment we're in right now. It's going to be bedtime, so you need some melatonin. Yeah. So you're walking your talk.
Done my sunbathing today. Got my sun.
Winning bit of vitamin D.
Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before I sum up?
It would be to everybody that listens to your podcast or that you reach. You're an example. Joe Hortai is an example. Everybody you have interviewed that I've seen is an example. There's got to be a doing. It's very easy. And New Zealand Army, if you're listening, or New Zealand Defence Force, if you're listening, there's got to be a doing to what you say. One example for our military is that, the Pukary program that we're running, you've got this amazing literature. You've got beautiful books that talk about mental wellness and mental health and resilience. But not once did I observe an actionable or doing of those things. So to everyone, man, you got to, if you want to be post-traumatic growth, if that's the framing that you choose, because that's all it takes is a framing. You just got to frame it that, yep, I've seen this horrible stuff and I've been hurt, but I'm gonna grow out of this. You've got to do. You can't just lay there and unless you're an amazing visualizer, which we know works. But even that takes work. I've got to lay still and I've got to taste and feel and see and that to process that skill. So long-winded, bro, but doing. You're, like I said, you're an amazing example, and people you have on. And that's probably a common theme with all the people that you have. They do. They don't just talk. They talk, they understand, and they do. Action is powerful. And if we don't do that, it's just back to the lie. And that's again what I love about nature. If you don't do, she will teach you a lesson. If you're in a big waves and you don't paddle, you end up on the rocks.
Exactly. Look, thank you for your kind words. I mean, literally, I had Marcus Aurelius Anderson on the show. Acta non verba, actions not words. I can't emphasize how much actions were important in the unit. We'd say words, and I would suggest the term lip service was there. You'd listen to them, or you've seen the person's actions and then he's saying words, so you know he's walking the talk. But absolutely, these people got to action it. If they're putting together all their nice OSH things and their tick boxes for their pamphlets, then yeah, let's put some action behind it. Can I please tell a short story from my personal experience?
Yeah, for sure.
So it's fairly well known. Everybody has those wobbly times, and I went through some wobbly and dark times earlier this year. Psychologist trying to get a little bit of help there, and long story short, I contacted our former special forces psychologist Alia, one of the best in the world.
Yeah.
And these the other psychologists, the civilian ones, have been saying, "Oh, Damien, you need to get a hobby. You need to grow tomatoes or something like this." I was like, "Oh, okay, I don't have a hobby. I need to get this thing." Anyway, I saw Alia and she said, and I will swear here, she said, "You don't need a fucking hobby, Damien." And she's a petite, beautiful, former Olympic athlete. And these words came out of her mouth. She said, "You don't need a fucking hobby, Damien. You need this, this, and this." And immediately that day I went out and actioned what she told me to do. And immediately I felt better. Yeah. Actions, moving forward. A quote from Sir Peter Blake would be, "The hardest part of any journey is to begin. That first step is the hardest." And there's more on there, but just take that first step. You will feel better.
And for me, you know, we could do another 7 podcasts, but yeah, for me, there's so much support around now. I've just me and my partner and a friend just ran a trip for veterans in the Able Tasman, all ex-unit members, and it was amazing. But we are that support. You know, I get tired sometimes of hearing that, "Oh, we can't do this, can't do that." Well, your mates are there. Just reach out. But you've got to have the courage to reach out. And you've got to have the courage to listen when he says, "Take that step forward," or she, you know, because that's what we don't want to hear. No, I'd rather be on the couch with my McDonald's. Well, you know, yeah, and that's the action that we've got to do. But people are out there like you, like we can watch these things. We can reach out to you if we need to. Yeah, and people need to stop making excuses. You know, me and my partner have been talking about a theme lately. If you said OSH, you know, I wish we had an individual OSH, like myself OSH.
Yeah.
And the things I'm not doing is I'm not doing self-care. You know, if I've got a mental health, if I've got a mental health issue, bro, then, you know, I need to do some self-action. Yes, I need guidance because some of us need a plan, and skilled people have good plans. But I've got to do that. I've got to do that myself.
Self-care.
You know, and if I was OSH, I'd be like, okay, today I've got to get out in nature, or today I've got to get vitamin D, or today I've got to eat good food. You know, and your OSH person inside would be going, "Hey, you're not."
That's a great way of putting it. Be your own bodyguard is the one there for situation awareness. Same thing for you. Be your own brain's bodyguard. Be your own brain's OSH guy.
Yep. Be that. Yeah, and you know, I'm not religious. I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. But if we talk about God, you know, God's in everyone. And when people pray and reach out, well, that's inside you. You know, that's actually inside you. Be that. Look for inner. Yes, reach out because that's what people need, but also look in, because there's some strength there. If you, you know, I like to say, paddle your own waka. You know, don't just be at the mercy of the river. Those that are listening that are not, you know, waka is a canoe. But paddle your canoe in the white water. Don't be a victim. But if you need to go into an eddy of calm water, then paddle in there. But don't just be thrown around by the waves. You know, if you're paddling, then you get to experience that fully, not, you know.
That's a beautiful analogy. It really is. Yeah. Again, we said it halfway through. If just one of those things that we said in that 5 minutes, you only got to take one.
Yes.
And take that first step. If something there resonates, we've done our job. Pup, thank you so much for your time. It's been absolute honor to have you on. Honor to see you again. All of the notes for the links to Pukary and so on will be in the show notes. And as Pup said, for those listening, reach out.
Grateful, mate. Yeah, super grateful. And thank you for the opportunity, and love what you're doing. And yeah, it's so needed more than ever.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll hit pause. We'll have a chat. Thank you so much, Pup.